Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Criterion Learning Series. Appreciate you joining us today. We are going to be talking about payroll year-end for the United States. As you know, this is a complicated and sometimes tricky discussion. So we do want to, first off, I have a disclaimer. If you do have any questions regarding the taxability of incomes or deductions, please consult your accountant, your tax advisor, or a tax consultant. Criterion Support cannot provide tax advice. We can, of course, answer questions on how something might need to be set up after you've received that advice and been told how to set something up. I do want to also mention, I'm going to show some new changes to different limits for different deductions. This is the latest data as of today. There was actually something that came out on the 1st of November with the 401k, and I have included that in here. So of course, things might change in the next month and a half if, for whatever reason, laws change and things like that, and things become effective. This is as of today, November 7th, 2025. So always check the latest information from the IRS and your tax advisors to get that updated. So first off, we're going to talk about the 2025 deduction limits, specifically for retirement accounts. And so 401ks, 403bs, and most 457 plans, the new limit for 2025 for the regular, what I would call the regular and Roth 401k plans is 23,500. That was what was announced on November 1st. So that is an increase of $500 over 2024. Let's talk about some changes that are coming to the catch-up deductions. And I set this up as a separate slide because this is something that's going to be significant that you'll need to pay attention to. And these are the changes to the catch-up for 401k, 403b, and most 457 plans. So now you'll have two different catch-up deductions. Of course, previously it was anybody who was 50 or older by the end of the tax year would be affected by the catch-up, but now it's broken up into 50 to 59 by the end of 2025, the end of 2025 tax year. The limit is 7,500. All right. New for 2025 and going forward, there is a new limit for employees who are 60 to 63, and that is 11,250. And there is a new setting in our system to handle this, and we'll show you where that is. But just be aware that you'll need to take into account those new limits. And, obviously people who are 60 to 63 get to contribute a little bit more. And we'll show you how that's set up. Right, to talk about flexible spending accounts. So the FSA health deduction at an increase of $100 to $3,300. There is no change to the dependent care, still $5,000. HSA or health savings accounts, there's an increase to the self-only coverage. It is now $4,300, an increase of $150. If the employee has family coverage, it's now $8,550, which is an increase of $250. And then the catch-up has no change, so the HSA catch-up is still $1,000. All right, so let's see how that applies in the system here. And so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my browser here, and we'll go ahead and, oops, where's my, here we go. Sorry about that. I need to show my browser. All right, so of course, this is one of those things where everything's going to be happening on the back end here. So I'm just going to go right out of self-service and into the settings of the system here. Very first thing I'm going to cover, because last time I waited till the end and we kind of ran out of time, is publishing W-2s and ACA forms. I want to show how that's set up so you get an idea of how that would be configured, and then we'll talk about actually doing that. So it's really a two-step process. The first is to set up a folder where they're going to land. If you don't already have this configured, where you go is to General in your settings here. You'd go to your documents, and you can add a folder using this drop down. You'll see Add Folder. I already have a folder for W-2 and ACA forms, but just to step through it, you just type in the name of whatever you want to call that. So you can call it tax documents, year-end documents, whatever you may want to call it. That is going to be the folder or that you can use when you go to publish. Okay. Now, these folders, when you publish, it doesn't give everybody access to everybody else's W-2. They will get their specific W-2 in that situation. You'll see I also have one for paychecks because you can publish paychecks, and this is for our Canadian friends. They have what's called a T4, so don't worry about that. So I made two separate folders. You could certainly do one. All right, and then let's look at actually publishing them, or document delivery as we refer to it here in the settings. So system configuration, document delivery. Now you'll see here I have paycheck by employee T4 and W-2. I'm going to set up the ACA just so you can see what that looks like. So you can see here the name, which report it refers to, the path. This is the folder. That's why I had to set it up first. And then here you'll see the distribution type here. So first off, of course, it needs to be active. We have this option here to deliver it to their personal email. So you may be aware there's two email addresses in the system. They have, the primary email address and then the personal email address. So that could be like a Gmail or Yahoo or whatever they're using for their personal mail. Maybe they don't want it delivered to their company email. You can say, let's deliver it to their personal mail. And then you'll see here the distribution type. You can choose to post in ESS only, or to send by email, or send by email only, just depending on whatever you select right there. All right, so that's when you push the publish button, what happens. And then here, like I mentioned, is the path. So let me set this up for ACA just so you can kind of see those steps. I'm just going to call it ACA. You can call it anything you like. And ACA forms, the description is optional, but I'll fill that in there. Then I would choose the one that's appropriate. If you do have 1099s, you may want to have those. And you'll see here, I can use the same folder for, all of them if I wanted to. If I made a folder called like year end or something, I could do that. But I'm going to do ACA. Of course, I need this to be active to use it. And I'm going to choose this. Now, you'll see here when I do send by email, I don't have the option to select the folder because I'm only doing sending by email. But as soon as I do post in ESS, then I select the path. And I need to select the appropriate folder just by clicking on it. You see here, click, and oops. When I click it, it's kind of highlighted there in gray, and then it shows up right there. All right, so pretty easy to configure, but it, of course, needs to be configured before you can publish. So now this is something, of course, ACA forms are due at a different time, but I want to show how that's set up just so you can get an idea. This would need to be configured before you actually do your W-2s or ACA forms, or even your paychecks if you're doing those. Okay, so that's the document delivery there. Let's talk about some of the settings in the system here. So under your payroll, we'll talk about deductions and of course income. So let's look at some deductions as an example here. I've got a ton of them set up in my system, but I'm going to click on 401k. Now I haven't set up the new 401k catch-up, so we'll go through those steps here, but you'll see your 401k. What you'll want to do is make sure the deduction type for your 401ks are set up as a 401k deferral if they are the pre-tax ones. Now, if they're Roth, they're going to be different, but for the pre-tax ones, they need to be 401k for deferral. And this is the standard 401k, not the catch-up. So it needs to be 401k deferral. All right, so pretty clear on that one, I think. And of course, you may have, say, if you're a 403b, you need to be 403b, and you'll see in here, I don't think I have a 457 set up, but there are other ones in here, 408, 457, et cetera. You'll want to go through your deductions and make sure that these are correct. Now, this does, in some cases, affect the taxability. So if something was not set up correctly, let's say 401k, you added a new deduction in January, and this was not selected, that means that all year long, these have not been pre-tax deductions. So that could cause some problems, obviously. And, we're here to help you if you have any questions on that. And how do you fix that, quote unquote, fix it? So we can talk about that. If you need to, reach out to us at help@criterionhcm.com. Now, there are other things where if you change this, it will just affect where it goes on the W-2. So, if you, didn't have this set maybe as a Roth 401k and it was just set as like after tax, it's not going to affect the taxability. Let's say this was a Roth plan, I didn't have this selected. It's not going to affect the taxability. So I could fix that. So it depends on what you're doing there. Just be aware that if you come into a 401k deduction or a 403b or whatever, and it's not set right, you may have some implications on the year to date information. So we're here to help you have questions on that and how we might be able to fix that or at least resolve it going forward. All right, and if I go to your, let's say your high deductible plans or whatever, you make sure the insurance type. Now insurance benefits, maybe you should be under 125. It depends on how you want to set that up, just like that. So make sure that they're configured correctly for this. Now, if you need something to show up on, let's say, your W-2, you can use these system labels to drive where it's going to go into. So that I had them set up there. I don't have any of the box like 14 and so forth. There should be system labels in your system, like I have these T4 ones. I don't have, for whatever reason, I don't have the ones for the W-2s, but you'll be able to control which boxes they show up in if you need to. So just like these T4 ones, you might see ones for the different boxes on the W-2. So if you need something to show up in that miscellaneous box, you can use the system labels to drive where that goes. Right. And of course, like I mentioned, you'll want to check your deductions. This is something that maybe you check from time to time just to make sure, especially if you're setting up a new one. As I mentioned, we're not going to be able to tell you if it should be pre-tax or not, but if you hear from your tax advisor, hey, this new deduction code should be a 125 or it should be something like that, we can help you to make sure that it is configured the way that your advisor told you to configure it by putting it into the right, label or whatever that is there. All right. And of course, this would apply to, FSA plans. They need to be set up as an FSA. And if I have, let me see if I have oh, here we go. An HSA plan would need to be set up as an HSA. Now, for the new 401k catch-ups, let's just show how that would work here. I'm going to say a 401k catch-up 60 to 63. Oops, this is 63. All right. I'm going to use that as both the code and description. Of course, your code may be different and your description may be different, but I'm going to set that up here. And then you'll notice we've got 401k CU2 over 50. That's the traditional catch up that we've been doing for a long time. This is the new one, 401k CU ages 60 to 63. Make sure you select this one for that deduction so that we can properly withhold the right amount. So that's how that would be configured there. Of course, how do you take that 401k? Is it regular and supplemental? It's up to you on how you do that there. Do you show the cost to the employee and employer? Is it a percentage or an amount? Of course, it's all configured based off of your particular situation. If it is a flat amount and there's a match or whatever, you can do that. I'm just going to do a flat amount there. Of course, I want it to be active. All right. Do I want to use an off cycle? Possibly. Do I want to pool it? So if you do have an option for an amount and a percentage, you probably want to pool it. So you'll probably check that box off right there. All right. I'm going to say it's employee and employer. Make sure your frequency is set correctly. You may need to withhold it every paycheck or every other, if you're biweekly, but what happens on the third paycheck, et cetera. These are going to be configured in your deduction frequency here. The limit, so per year. All right. Is it a combined limit or separate limits here? A combined limit would mean that there's an employee and employer shared limit. And then you'd put in your amount here for. Okay. Now, if this is the parent of the pool, you leave this blank. Let's say I had a percentage option for the employees and a dollar amount. I could choose which one I want to be the parent. I'm going to choose this one. And so I'm going to put a dollar sign here just to make it clear this is the dollar sign one. All right. And I'll save that. And then I may want to add a second one here and call it percentage. Active pool, show employee. Again, I'm just going to kind of go through here. So the cost, calculation method, all right, contribution type. And then, like I said, what I would do here is down here, I have the pooled parent, and then I would be able to see the other one. So one of them needs to be blank. In other words, I can't have I have to, if I'm going to pool them, I have to choose which one is going to be the parent. It doesn't matter which one, but one of them has to be if I'm doing something like this. All right, so 401k catch up dollar sign as the parent. So that means if they switch mid-year, we're still going to see the limit, total limit in there. You'll notice these fields are now grayed out because it's going to read the settings on there. All right, I'm not going to go into like the formulas and stuff like that. We're not really worried about that. This could possibly be tied to, excuse me, a benefit. So, if you do it through benefits enrollment, you might do that. These would need, of course, be set up first. Now, you can clone a benefit, and then it can do that. But then if you do that clone, let's say I clone an existing catch-up plan, I would need to make sure I come into that new cloned deduction and change the type. If you don't, limits are going to possibly apply to somebody, and it might be a mess. So always double check these things. And like I mentioned, you can reach out to us if you have questions. All right. And then, let's say I go to FSA medical and I need to change the limit here. I can do that right here, 3,300. All right. And put that in there. So very easy to update those. Now, of course, you may have other deductions that are not related to directly tax things that have a change. Perhaps you've got I don't know, some contribution to charity and there's a certain limit or something like that, or you've got a uniform deduction and there's a limit. You may need to change those going into next year. Be aware that if you change the limit here and they've reached the limit this year and you do this early, it's possible that they're going to have extra amount taken out in 2024. So if, let's say, this LTD had a limit for this year, I'd want to change it after the last payroll just to make sure that they don't contribute too much in the current year. The other option would be to create a new deduction, which could be a little bit messy. So I would say change that at the end of the year after your last payroll or before you do your first payroll of next year. All right, so just an example of those. Of course, there's many different deductions, and I don't have all day to cover different types of deductions, but hopefully that showed you how some of those things might work. Let's look at incomes, because similar things can happen in income codes. You might want to show something in a particular box on the W-2. Again, you can use that in your system labels. So you could show that right here. There's really not a lot you would do in here that would that's changed as far as in my research on these types of things here. Now, you do want to make sure if, let's say, you have adoption assistance, that it does say adoption assistance, or whatever it is. I'm not sure what you might have, but let's say you had a domestic partner benefit dependent. Again, you would want to make sure these are set up correctly. So we do encourage you to go through your various income codes, deduction codes, and double check the types. All right, so it is important to check those things and make sure that the compensation type is correct and things like that. And it may affect taxability depending on whatever the situation is, or it might affect just how it shows on the W-2. So make sure that they're correct. If there is a situation where perhaps something should not have been taxed and it was set up incorrectly, you can reach out to us and let us know. Or maybe you're adding a new code and your advisor says that this needs to be set up as a third-party LTD 125 plan. We have that here. Or if you're just a little confused and they say it should be set up like that, we can just kind of guide you to that compensation type and how that works. So this could affect how it's taxed or not taxed and things like that. So we're here to help with answer the questions as far as how the system works, but not how things should be configured. Again, you may have incomes with different limits, maybe possibly an annual limit, an annual ceiling, as we call that here. So you'll want to change those if they are increasing or changing next year. If, let's say, whatever this is here, callback is changing, a new limit, and it maybe is a period limit. Maybe you have a new policy in place and they can only have so much per month or something. You'll want to change those, before you run the first payroll of the year. Now, if it's, the first payroll of the year and the limit is really high, no one's going to reach to the first one and you miss that, you can fix it maybe before anybody reaches the limit. But just be aware of these limits. If you have a policy that's applying to a certain income code, make sure you change those limits. Let's look at tax rates real quick here. Usually, you don't need to worry about tax rates except for unemployment, because most states and localities and so forth have unemployment rates that are per employer. It's based off of how many claims people have made against you in the past year and things like that. So you might need to come in and change your rates for unemployment. You shouldn't have to do it for things like income taxes and say SDI in California and stuff like that. But unemployment is kind of a little bit different because it's different for each company and things like that. So I'll just click on one here just so you get an idea for what this looks like. You'll see here your tax identifier. You will want to make sure this is in here because it might show up on quarterly reports. It might show up on year-end reports where you have to make sure your state EIN is correct. So double check that, like mine here, that I'm made one up obviously, but this needs to match up with what it is. And then here's your rate. All right, so 3.6%, and you'll see how that is entered 0.036, but it shows as 3.6% when you click out. So just be aware, if I put in 3.6%, I don't think I want to pay 360% of tax. Make sure you put it in as 0.0 whatever. So if it's 2%, you do 0.02. All right, so double check it. After you enter that amount in, click out and make sure it shows the right thing. And especially you can see it here too. So make sure that this matches up with what you're expecting and how that works there. Now, what you can do is, of course, use effective dates here. Here we do have effective dates. Unlike on deduction codes, we don't have like a separate one. You could have a separate one, as I was mentioning, but here you'll see an effective date. So if I want to say for 2025, what is it for California? Search for it here. And let me find California as an example. Okay, SUI, effective 1/1/25. And again, I can put my tax identifier there and add it. And then you'll notice here, I'm going to have a few different California SUIs. Here's the one where I put in the new rate. Let's say it was now 3.7%. Do that. Of course, your tax ID and stuff like that. Now, that's how that would be configured there. All right, so there's your tax rates and how that works there. So that's some of the configuration stuff. And of course, there's other things that might happen. You might need to change your payroll schedules, add new pay groups, minimum wage changes. That could also be impacted by this. So you'll see here with minimum wages, we do have an effective date for this. If you're using our system for minimum wage calculations, it's possible that you have a change coming in on January 1st. So obviously, I don't know every single, minimum wage rate across the US, but that might be something that comes into play. We're here again to answer those questions on how do you set that up. We're not going to say, here's what the rate is. That's not our position here. But if you say our rate is now going up to $15 an hour or something, you can, set that up and put that in there. So you would, come in here and show this as an example. San Diego, and I don't know. I'm just going to say San Diego. And let's say the minimum wage is $16. I don't know what it is. And 1/1/25. Again, this has an effective date. So you could put it in early if you need to. So this will double check with minimum wage. And you can look up how that all works in the system if you need to. So that's another example where you need to do that. The payroll schedule, you will want to make sure you have one set up for next year because you can't process payroll without a payroll schedule. I have 3 different payroll schedules. You may have one or you may have multiple like I have. So you'll want to go in. Let's say I'm going to continue going forward with weekly. I already have 26 set up. Let me see if I can find one where I don't have next year. Okay, so I don't have it configured for biweekly. And if I tried to go in and run a payroll, look here in December, I would have a problem. I wouldn't be able to run a payroll after December 5th pay date because I don't have one configured here. Now, it's possible this does not line up with the exact calendar year because when you're doing like a biweekly, you get 26 pay periods and that can kind of float around. And when you first establish that, let's say the start date was, in fact, you can see here, I've got a start date here. It moves. If 26 weeks is not exactly 365 days, so it moves around. You may need to create one for the last 1 or 2 pay periods of this year, just based off of how long you've been using the system and how this is configured, but it's easy to do. So I'd hit new here. Then notice I don't need to worry about the start date because I'm basing it off an existing payroll schedule. And I just need to put down how many I need to create, 26. And boom, it created all 26 of them, including one in this year. What you might want to do is go through and just find out, does it fall on a holiday or anything like that? I believe mine are on Thursday, so I should be safe, but maybe, 4th of July or something like that you need to worry about. So just double check those again, and you can fix it now. You could, of course, fix it when you go to process payroll and it lands on a holiday. You can move it in the payroll process. But if let's say I have no idea, but let's say this is Thanksgiving next year, I might need to go through and move it to the 19th or something like that. I could type it in and do that. So create your schedule and save it, and do that, of course, for every pay group that's going, or pay schedule that's going forward for next year. And as I mentioned, there might be other things that get changed. There might be shift rates that have new things out there for next year. It all depends on what your policies are for your company. Some of these are not like related to taxes and laws and stuff like that. They're your particular setups. So you'll need to check those things. Like I mentioned, maybe there's a new piece rates out there for your projects, or shift rates, or overtime rules and things like that. So reach out to us if you have questions. Let's talk about some reports we can run to balance our payroll and stuff like that. So when you're doing your W-2s, of course, you're going to be looking at things like the taxable wages on stuff and your deductions and incomes and stuff like that. So under payroll reports, there's going to be kind of 3 groups of reports I'm going to recommend you run to make sure everything is correct. They're going to be your deduction reports. So kind of how you want it to go. When you're looking at, let's say, the W-3 and you see your total for 401k and stuff like that, you can look at your deduction totals reports. All right. And when I run this, I can say, for, in my situation, because it's still in the middle of the year, kind of, well, towards the end of the year, current year, obviously if this is January 1st, I would do previous year and run it for the company. And I could, if I'd like to, I can break it down, but it doesn't make sense if I'm really doing the W-3s. Maybe my employer does, but everything else, I probably don't want to do that, and run this report for the year and be able to look at things like the total for each deductions and make sure, like, oh, okay, there's my 401ks. Does that match up to what I'm seeing on the W-3 and the stuff like that? Benefits that are ACA compliant benefits. Is this the total deductions and the total, employer amounts for these things? So I can look at these in a total. All right. Now, of course, if I want to look at this by employee, I have 2 choices here: the deduction total by employee and the deduction summary report. Let me show you this one here again. I'm going to do current year for this. If I want to look at a particular deduction, I could choose 1 or more deductions here. I'm just going to run it for all, and hopefully this doesn't take forever. I don't need all my 0 deductions there. And I'm going to run this. Now, I did not want to check that box for using the pay period dates because I'm doing a tax report. It's always looking at pay dates and not pay period dates. But here I can see, for an example, my 401ks and those folks who've had 401k and how much they've had year to date. So when I look at their W-2 and I look at Ron's W-2, I'm hoping to see $1,200 in the 401k. And I go down and, Blue Shield, if that's showing up on your W-2. Now, this one, of course, has the employer amount. So you'll be able to see that information on there and double check that. This is the one that's by deduction code and then employee. This is the one that's by employee and then deduction code. So those are the 2 different reports showing the same data, just laid out slightly differently. All right, so this will be, whoever it is first alphabetically in my situation, or however I have it sorted. I can see here. So Gary, and here's his deductions. Again, I might look at his W-2s and make sure it matches up with that. All right, incomes, again, we can look at these here. So you might want to look at the totals. This is very similar to the deduction totals report. It's going to be all the all the incomes for the year. So current year, and run this, and it's going to be this. I'm not going to run these reports because they're like the deduction version, but for the income code, just want to show you the total. So you might look at all these, add all these up and say, okay, the total, income is, 10,428,000. If I take these, certain deductions out, that should match what's in box 1, because I take my taxable incomes minus my pre-tax deductions is match up with box 1, and then go down to box 3 and box 5. So you see those types of things. It should also, of course, match up to what you see on your tax reports down here. Let's say taxable wages totals. So when you look at this and you do that math, like I said, you take the taxable incomes minus the pre-tax deductions, you can say, all right, does it match up to what I'm showing in, let's say, federal income tax or the state income tax? Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. If you're in multiple states, you're going to see mine's got tons of states. That's going to be difficult. You add up all the states, hopefully it matches up to what you're seeing there. But again, there's some states where there's no tax. So, look at the federal, W-2 is going to have box 1, 3, and 5, which is your taxable for federal, Medicare, and Social Security. and you'll compare that to this report, and you'll see, okay, boxes 2, 4, and 6 is going to be the taxable totals. So again, I can see these here. So I would go down to federal. Here we go, federal, and I would see my total taxes, 9,737,635.10. Here's my total withheld. Does that match up to what I'm seeing on my W-3? Hopefully it does. It should, because it's all reading from the same data, but I need to check that information there. If I need to go down to, again, just like the deduction and income reports, if I need to go down to the employee level, I can do these right here, taxable wages by employee and taxable wages by tax. So I can see that individual detail of the employee information. And then finally, for tax filing, I know we're already at the top of the end here, but let me talk about this just real quick. Got my W-2s. I want to talk about publishing them. So run for your company there. To employee, I'm going to act like we're going to print everything on a blank sheet of paper, so it's not going to be pre-printed. And 2024. Okay, I could run it for one employee. Maybe I want to sort it in a certain way. I'm going to do it by last name. And then I'm going to apply this. This will take a little bit longer to run, but you'll see this delivery option. This is where that publish comes in. Now, you may remember if you attended the webinar a few weeks ago that we did have an option for electronic W-2s. Let me just, while this is processing, bring that up here. Employees can now opt in to paperless tax delivery. So they check that, they can agree to this disclaimer here. Now this will mean that it's not going to print a copy of the W-2 for me because I selected this. The employees have to opt into this. So you may encourage them to go to preferences and check that box. All right. And I was hoping to be done, but it's still going. Let's do this here. Now, I'm not going to publish them right now because I have another one of these in a few weeks, and I don't want to double it up. But you can see here, we got our boxes 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6, and those types of things. If you're a tipped employer, you might have numbers in those boxes, 7 and 8. Of course, if they, were they had the 401k and so forth, they may have stuff in the 12 boxes here. Here's the state stuff. As you can see, my person has been across a couple of different states, so that's on there. And he has locals and stuff like that. Mine's a little different. You're not going to have people moving around like mine that I've got all over the place. But you can review your W-2s. And the reason I have 1,600 of them is because I have people in all these different states. So it's kind of crazy. You were not going to have that. Here you'll see publish the paperless and print paper copies. So this is the delivery publish paperless is going to publish to self-service and email, depending on my delivery options that we talked about earlier. Print paper copies is going to print those folks who do not have that box checked. They have this checked, they're not going to get a paper copy by default. All right, now if I want to save a copy of this, I can. Save this to a PDF. In that case, I could print it because it's a PDF and you can do whatever you want. But if I want to download this, but you double check this information, make sure that it's correct. Like I said, by running those reports under taxes, under incomes, under deductions, to make sure things are showing up in the correct boxes and checked off correctly as far as, retirement and so forth. So you can double check all that information there. As you can see, we do print the instructions. So we do have those because we're telling the system we're not using pre-printed ones. If you are using pre-printed, of course, we don't have the instructions, and this will be, blank. You won't have the grids and everything like that. All right, the W-3 real quick, and then we'll go ahead and end this here. So just so you can see what this looks like. W-3, this is again going to take a little bit of time. Now, when I publish, I do want to mention one thing. That didn't take as long. When I publish those, if you go to your documents, I'm talking about publishing here, you will see one PDF for each year. You're not going to see each individual's PDF, each individual employee's PDF. You're going to see one. This is basically that report I just saw. However, when it goes to the employees, they're going to get their individuals. So don't panic if you come in here and you see this one and it's, hundreds of pages. It's not like you're publishing out everybody getting to see every employee's W-2. No, what's going to happen is when they go to their documents, so my documents, and whatever folder that was in, I think it was tax forms, they're going to see their W-2. They're not going to see every W-2. So they click on this and it's going to be their W-2 for the year. Let's go ahead. Why did that not blink there for a second? It's going to show their W-2, and so they'll be able to download that W-2. So don't panic. I know some people go, why do I see all the W-2s? I'm so worried everybody's going to see them. No, this is just your copy for like admin purposes if you want to see what you printed, but it does not go to every employee. All right, so here's the W-3. So you can see these things. Of course, the type of employer, that is actually set up in payroll settings. Let me show you where that is, in case yours is not checked correctly. We can go to payroll settings. Okay, employer type. All right, so if you're one of those, that's there. That's how that works. So if you go to this and it says that you're a military, and go, wait a minute, we're not the military. Make sure that's set there. Of course, double check your company EIN. This is the federal EIN. That in cases now this is something that you can fix. After it, let's say you realize it's blank, you can come into here and you can correct your EIN right here. And of course, then you look at your totals. And I remember those tax reports I ran. I had those totals for boxes 1, 3, and 5, 2, 4, and 6, and so forth. You can see those there. All right. Obviously, there's a lot that can go into tax filing, and I don't have another 2 hours to talk about all this stuff. We're going to have another one of these classes covering the same stuff in 4 weeks. So you're welcome to rejoin us there. Maybe changes have come to the limits. Who knows what's going to happen in the next month? Hopefully there's not changes, because that would just be kind of a pain in the neck. But you check all this stuff. And then we're going to talk about ACA in the new year. So if you also have to do your ACA forms, we're going to talk about that there. Let's go ahead and look at that schedule upcoming. And where did my PowerPoint go here? Our upcoming schedule here. I just need to find my controls for Zoom. There they are. I apologize. They moved to a different window for me. Okay. So here's our upcoming schedule. As you can see, in 2 weeks, you have a break if you're in the US. You don't need to worry about Canadian year-end, unless you're just really interested. What do they do in Canada? You've heard about T4. Maybe you have one, you're curious. You could certainly join us. You're welcome to, but don't worry about it if you're not in Canada. If you want to revisit this topic, it should be the same, but you want to revisit it here in 4 weeks on the 5th of December. We're going to talk about US payroll year-end as well. And then we're going to revisit Canada. I'm only going through the end of the year here, just because these are so important of topics. On December 5th, though, we will announce our January stuff, including ACA filing, which will be, if I recall correct, like the middle of January and the middle of February. So this is our upcoming payroll stuff. Appreciate you joining us today. Questions about this? I think there were some things in the Q&A, which hopefully our team got back to you and answered. I see Connor's answering a question now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just one question from Delvon that we were just asking each other about. Opting for the paperless report year-end W-2s, can that be done in the mobile app? Do you know?
Let me look. I do have the latest version of the mobile app here, and I don't
I would imagine
recall it being in there.
The new version of the app, the newest, but not the legacy app. I'm not sure.
The new version doesn't have that setting in there now, as of today.
Then the old one will not have it either.
Possibly we'll have it, later on. We will
Right.
go, obviously we'll announce that. So Delvon, great question. And I'm going to bring this up to our team to say, hey, we should have that in there, because we have a lot of people who are using mobile only. So if we can get that option, just add it in there, that'd be great. But today it's not there. But great question. And
thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I saw the other question about, can you remove old tax rates for that? Certainly, yeah, you could update those. And let's say you got one from 2018, you want to get rid of it, you can delete that if you like. It's not going to undo anything in the system. You just want to make sure you have at least the newest latest one in there if you're still in that state. So great question on that. I saw Connor answer that question.
Yeah, it might make sense for us to add a an active toggle to that screen like others, Steve, I would say.
Yeah,
Yes.
because
Yeah,
then
a good
you lose
CFR.
any record of any changes to rates.
Exactly. Yeah. So it might be a good idea to have it in there just to, hey, this is what a rate was last year or 2 years ago. Maybe just it's nice to know maybe somebody wants to see how your rates changed over the last few years. But yeah, I agree, Connor. That's a good CFR to present of having a toggle to show or hide inactive rates. That's a great one. But so thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We really do appreciate it. Hopefully, we answered many of your questions. And if you do have any others, help at CriterionHCM.com. We're here to help you. Of course, there's many other resources out there just to look information up about limits and IRS stuff. And of course, there's like the employer guides and stuff that'll help you with how things should be configured. But thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again, if not in 4 weeks, then in January. So thanks again. Appreciate your time.